Just because I mentioned that the bad guys have the access to all the good tools, so do we. The democratization of tools is real. It's here. It is called open source intelligence, and we have an expert here with us, Gianluca Mezzofiore, OSINT editor of CNN, to tell us a little bit about what we can do and what we shouldn't. Gianluca? One last thing. I didn't mention AI once. That should merit a secondary, applause. Thank you.
Thank you. Hello. Just checking if this works. Yeah, it does. Just to begin with, a quick poll. How many of you have heard of OSINT and open source investigations? Can you raise a hand? Okay, quite a few, actually. So, as Dimitri said, I am a senior editor at CNN for investigations, and I specialize on OSINT or open source investigations. And I'm going to give you like a brief overview of the status of disinformation and misinformation at the moment. And then I will give you a few examples of tools that we use to combat disinformation and misinformation, and hopefully some solutions in my conclusive statement. But let's start with this. Does any of you see anything wrong with this video? So, this video is AI generated, and it went absolutely viral on X. It gathered 18 million views, and it was reposted by pro-Russian influencers. And the guy in the video claims to be a certain Jacques Bertin, a French worker for Bugatti, a luxury car. And in the video, he says that the wife of the Ukrainian president purchased one of those luxury cars when they were in Paris. And as you can see there, Ozzy Cossacks is a pro-Russian influencer, and you can see the blue tick there on X. So this guy also produced a bill, receipts, which apparently looks authentic. There was even a website called Vérité Cachée featuring the article about the purchase of this luxury car. But, as I said, it's all fake. It's all AI generated. And this is part of a pro-Russian campaign that's been going on in the last few years. Jacques Bertin was a cartographer. There's nobody under that name working for Bugatti in Paris. Bugatti themselves issued a denial. And the video has some signs of AI use, like the abrupt video cuts that you've seen. There's some mismatched lip and mouth movements. The eyes look in all different directions in a way that's unnatural. And the accent also is fake. The invoice is also quite interesting, and now we go into the details, but the devil is in the details. There's a missing currency, as you can see. The company VAT number is not there, and there's also a typo in the city name. But most importantly, the website still has the AI prompts. I don't know how many of you can read French, but it says please, can you rewrite this article in a way that's more conservative. So these people even left the AI prompts from ChatGPT on the website. Now I wanna go to other examples of disinformation and misinformation. Last year there was an Iran missile attack on Israel, and along with several videos, the IDF published this video. Now you can see just a screen grab because then it was deleted, and the video turned out to be from Russia. That's a YouTube version of the video of a missile launch. Likewise, we talked about an influencer, a pro-Russian influencer, but now we have another example of influencer that some of you may know. It's Jackson Hinkle. He's a former Bernie bro that's now a MAGA supporter. He was banned from social media platforms and then obviously restored with Elon X. He's been invited to Donbass by Russia and then to a UN event to talk about Ukrainian terrorism. And he has this habit of posting fake or AI-generated videos. In this case, he claims that this video shows Israelis in panic as Iranian missiles lands in Israel. But a quick, reverse image search work and the geolocation work shows that this video is actually filmed in Argentina, in Buenos Aires, and it shows fans going crazy for Louis Tomlinson, the former One Direction band member. So nothing to do with Israel and the Iran attack on Israel. There were other examples, for example, this video which I quickly showed you, the reverse image search work, which claimed to be like the aftermath of an Iranian missile strike with like fires, extensive fires. But again, like by basically searching on Google for a screen grab from the video, you can see that there are occurrences of the video from Texas or Chile. So again, nothing to do with Israel. I'm gonna borrow this definition of the key factors driving misinformation, disinformation from a keynote speech that the founder of Bellingcat, Elliot Higgins, did last week in Cambridge, just because it's excellent. And I think it really gives you an idea of that we're not dealing with a single actor, but rather multiple factors intertwined. And they are technological, psychological, and political. Some of the drivers are here, and they've been mentioned extensively this morning and yesterday. The algorithm amplifying this type of content, the monetization, obviously, from some of these self-interested actors, some of these influencers, the decline and fragmentation of traditional media and gatekeepers, and the information ecosystems. And then there are also the personal biases that were mentioned in the panel before mine about, the fact that sometimes we don't search and we don't pursue the content that's good for us, and we just keep scrolling on social media. Being part of certain communities, obviously, that are quite fringe and self-enclosed, purity testing that's now become quite mainstream, and weaponization, to go to the political drivers, when the more sort of classical drivers of misinformation and disinformation, so the weaponization by state and political actors, influence operations, and polarization. And here I mentioned what are being called the OSINT accounts, which are OSINT accounts that self-proclaimed OSINT accounts that have OSINT in their name on Twitter and on X, but actually they're just pursuing clicks for engagement, and they often post inaccurate, while when not properly fake information. And I just want to talk. I was just going to give an example of the sort of evolution of this information by using using Russia, although this I think can be applied to a lot of actors. And so this is a story we did back in 2020 about a Russia disinformation operation that basically they set up a troll farm in Ghana, Africa. And the guy at the bottom there is called Wiredu and is a Russian operative. And at the time, he hired a bunch of witting locals. They were local content producers. They didn't know that Russia was behind this. But what they were doing was posting polarizing Pan-African content with an eye to the audience sensitive to Black Lives Matter in the US. So they set up fake profiles claiming to be in the United States, and posting often inaccurate or fake information with the idea to inflame divisions and provoke unrest. How we found out Russia was behind this? Well, one of the indication was that on the website, which was mainly fake and full of fake content, the pictures are, I don't know, it's pretty small over there, but the picture had a Russian name, it was in Cyrillic. So we looked at the website, which was a WordPress website, and they left all the information on the back end still available, and there was a lot of Russian content, Cyrillic content. So that was the first indication. And then we finally managed to find all the profiles, or the real profiles behind the real ones. And then our team went to the ground and challenged Wiredu in Russian, using Russian, and he replied. Now Wiredu featured in a Wagner-produced movie called The Tourist, so his career is not over. That was 2020 though, and in 2024, last year, the situation has fundamentally changed. At the time, it was kind of top-down. There was one Russian operative hiring a series of trolls, while now we have, I mentioned already, Aussie Cossacks. Now we have real influencers, pro-Russian influencers that are mostly self-interested, so they're doing it for the money. And there is AI, which wasn't there in 2020. This move is actually pretty smart and more effective. They're sort of minimizing the costs and maximizing the impacts. These influencers already have, they already done the hard work of building followers, so they already have like a pretty trusted audience. And this audience, these followers, are part of specific communities that trust the accounts. I already mentioned the use of AI, but another interesting part here on the right is the presence of grassroots influencers. This is Marika. She's a pro-Russian influencer from Mariupol. Mariupol, as you probably know, was under siege, was heavily bombed, and after it was occupied by Russia, he underwent a process of Russification. So all the areas that were destroyed have been rebuilt with an eye to wiping out the Ukrainian culture and replacing it with the Russian culture. And one of the most dramatic moments of the war was the bombing of the Mariupol theater, where a lot of Ukrainian refugees were sheltering. You can see this satellite image on the right. It was bombed despite having written Deti, which means children, in front of the theater. The picture over here with the cranes is the theater as it's being rebuilt. So Marika is doing the work of showing how rosy the picture is now in Mariupol, how great life is in Mariupol, while standing literally next to the place of a massacre. So this is the sort of disinformation that is being put out, and this is a way to showing, to sort of displaying how it's being carried out. And I think it's particularly interesting because these grassroots influencers, they're from the place and they have a trusted audience. They might not always be effective, but they're creating a very toxic discourse. Again, I'm borrowing from Elliot about this. This is, I think, the status of the agents that are carrying out disinformation and misinformation. So obviously, you have the official state actors, the proxies, and the self-interest actors, the influencers who are doing it for the money. But central to all of this is the true believers. I think one big misunderstanding of disinformation and misinformation is thinking of the audience as poor victims of misinformation, but the reality is that the system is constantly engaging these communities. It's a back and forth relationship. And and it goes. There are some examples of having the influencers having a bigger role, and other cases of state actors. But I think it's a situation in constant flux. And the dangerous thing now is that there is an institutional capture of this information. So you can see how it's seeping through all the major institutions, or in the United States, but also in Europe, and how this sort of self-created circle keeps being carried out. Now I'm just going to take a step back and talk a little bit about OSINT, or open source investigations. And OSINT deals with anything that is publicly available and can be obtained for free or by paying a fee. And some of the examples you might have heard of are, flight tracking, for example. There are websites like Flight Radar 24 where you can track flights, or ship tracking, like marine traffic. And at the core of it is geolocation and chronolocation, which is establishing where a certain video or image has taken place and when. And then, as you saw from Maripol, the analysis of satellite images is quite key. OSINT does not include material obtained illegally or by hacking, although obviously material that's been hacked and then subsequently leaked can be analyzed. I'm going to talk about the core values a little bit later in the conclusions. But one of the main ideas behind OSINT is the sort of methodical transparency, which is the idea of showing our workings. You see an example here about a story we did on the hospitals that were under attack in northern Gaza. We often have a methodology section at the end of our investigations, and that's because one of the core values of OSINT is transparency, the idea of trying to bridge a gap between us and the audience in a time of crisis of journalism by showing our workings. So the audience can replicate what we've done. All these tools, as we say in top, are publicly available. Sometimes you have to pay a fee, but the core, some of the core tools, like for example Google Earth, are free. There are some satellite services like Sentinel Hub or Copernicus that are for free. So it's very much a process of collaboration and transparency. Here are some examples of the tools I mentioned. You can see the story that we did on this missile supplies delivered from China to Iran using satellite imagery and ship tracking. There's some metadata analysis over there. This is tracking the flight where the founder of Wagner, Prigozhin, was when he went down. This is some analysis using geolocations and a weapons analysis. Chronolocation establishes the time something has happened. More satellite image analysis about a piece we did last month on the Syrian attacks in Syria against the Alawite community, and a really challenging geolocation we did for that piece. I'm gonna now give you a few examples more in depth about a few stories. It's a mix of news stories and investigations we worked on just to give you an overview, and then we'll get to some conclusions, and hopefully you guys are gonna have some questions. So we talked about Russia. We talked about the invasion of Ukraine. Before the invasion, there was a flurry of videos from TikTok and Telegram that emerged from the border of Ukraine, where the Russian troops were gathering, were building up for the invasion, and a community sort of that was already present, because Bellingcat has been going on for several years. But I think for the first time, OSINT sort of became more mainstream. And it was I call it a watershed moment. It was for me personally, because at the time I was already doing OSINT investigations, but CNN wasn't really focused on that, while after Ukraine, it sort of became part of our day-to-day coverage. So these two videos were part of the disinformation campaign from Russia and from pro-Russian actors before the invasion. They, might not tell you much, but they were part of the sort of fake evidence that Russia tried to build to justify the invasion. And these two were posted by a lot of influencers and pro-Russian profiles, claiming it's Ukrainian saboteurs infiltrating Russia, the Rostov region in Russia from Ukraine. They claimed that these two videos were hundreds of kilometers apart, so one was near Mariupol and the other one was more near Rostov. They were used by Putin as an excuse to send troops to eastern Ukraine. So a pretty important, a pivotal moment. But within the time of, I think, 1 hour, as Elliot says there, the community of OSINT, of open source analysts, got together and managed to geolocate these two videos. And it turns out the two videos were actually filmed pretty much in the same place. And they're deep inside separatist territory, so Russian territory controlled by Russia and Russian separatists in Donbass. So nothing to do with Ukrainians. Someone pointed out that the armored vehicle there is not even part of the Ukrainian troops. So this happened in 1 hour. But the problem is, debunking often isn't enough. This was widely communicated, and as we know, the invasion happened anyway. So I'm gonna give you another example of an investigation we did on going back to Mariupol. This was the maternity hospital in Mariupol that was bombed in March 2022. So shortly after the invasion started. You probably have seen some pictures or videos from this. I will show you in the next slide. One pregnant woman was evacuating the hospital or covered in blood. And that was one of the, I think, iconic images from Mariupol, from the invasion. But what we wanted to do with this investigation is to show, how first of all, debunk Russian claims. So Russia claimed this hospital wasn't a functioning hospital, the maternity hospital number 3 in Mariupol, because it had been converted into a base for Azov battalion in Ukraine. They also claimed there weren't any pregnant people, and that it wasn't an airstrike. So we in our investigation, we debunked each one of these claims. But not only that, we sort of tracked how Russia prepared this attack. You can see an example there at the bottom. The ambassador telling the UN Security Council that the maternity hospital number 1 was converted into a combat position. Now we know that this was hospital number 3. So this is like part of the strategy from Russia to sort of deflect and prepare the ground for the attack. We created a 3D model to show that the hospital was still functioning. We tracked some of the people who were at the hospital, some of the reports about lack of fuel, for example. There were cars parked there. There was no military presence in all the videos and satellite imagery we analyzed. And crucially, we also, in the 3D model, we also showed the crater, which was consistent with a 1,000-pound bomb being dropped from the sky. So this was very clearly an airstrike. And then we go to Mariana. Mariana was the iconic image of this attack. She was pictured here by a AP team on the ground. I don't know if you guys seen the incredible documentary, the film from Mariupol. Mariana very soon became a target for Russia disinformation campaign. So first they claimed she wasn't pregnant. Then they claimed she was the same person in this image and then in another image where she's on a stretcher. And I'm not showing the other one because it's really graphic, and unfortunately the woman, the child died. And then, she became a target, and this is the Russian embassy in the UK tweeting that. I think Twitter took it down when they were still taking down this type of content for abusive behavior. You might think the story ends here, but Mariana managed to flee, and then she was interviewed by the BBC. The problem is that during the interview, there was also a pro-Russian blogger with her. So we don't know how much she was, under duress when she said what she said during the interview. But she claimed that she didn't hear any planes, which we know isn't true, not only because of the huge crater, you can see the proportion with the person there, but also because the AP team on the ground witnessed that and other people witnessed that. She also claimed, that she was a target of the disinformation campaign from both sides. So I think she's like a very complex issue, because obviously she was first a target of Russia's disinformation campaign, and then she sort of unwittingly probably became a mouthpiece of that. I'm gonna go to the next slide, and this is part of what I call community resilience. That's sort of what part of the solution of how to combat disinformation and the very complex type of disinformation we can find. So going to Gaza, this was on the left there. This was a UN guest house that was attacked. You can see the big hole on the side of the building. The UN said that the attack came from Israel, and that one of the UN workers there, Bulgarian, was killed. Now, we geolocated this guest house in Deir el-Balah, and the IDF pretty quickly denied attacking the guest house. They said that the UN statement was baseless slander. But we received almost immediately weapon remnants from the ground. Not only the image of the hole, but also weapon remnants. And talking to experts, this is undeniably a tank shell, and a pretty specific type of tank shell that's only the IDF has. The hole also on the wall is consistent with tank shell fire. What happened was that we published like a short piece on it, but then the Washington Post built on it. They took our images, they looked at the weapon remnants, but they also obtained other images and the satellite imagery showing where the tank that fired a tank shell likely was. So this is an example of, even though we didn't coordinate with the Washington Post, how other media organizations can sort of build on our reporting. And I think the most prominent example of that was our investigation into, or rather, the several media investigations into the killing of Palestinian-American journalist Shireen Abu Akleh. The story was that she was covering an Israeli army raid in Jenin on May 11, 2022. When she was killed, there were several people that witnessed that, but you know, there was a strong denial from Israel, and we used audio forensics to figure out the distance between the bang of the muzzle blast and where she was standing, and using geolocated videos. We figured out that the only location where they could have fired from was an IDF convoy 200 meters away. I mentioned this story. This is my colleague Katie Pugliese, was the reporter for the story. I mentioned this story because it was a truly difficult story to cover, as you can imagine, and also because there were several challenges from an ethical point of view. We received a lot of videos from bystanders, and sharing those videos obviously was key for the transparency, for the sake of transparency for the story. The problem is that sharing the location of some of these videos and sharing the videos themselves from bystanders could have put them in danger, because obviously, as we geolocated the video, anyone else could, when the article goes public, and in particular, Israeli authorities could, and that could have, considering the fact that Israel was so strongly denying shooting Shireen, that could have put the witness, in danger. So we kind of went against what I told you before, the principle of transparency, and we didn't publish that particular video, which was key to show the convoy, because the people were, the witnesses we're talking to were scared of retribution. But the sort of other side of that was this, which is, it wasn't just us, it was a whole community on social media. So it was, Bellingcat, that is not just an organization, it's a community that's present on Discord, on other social media. They have a lot of volunteers, and they were the first actually to publish an investigation into the killing of Shireen. Then you can see on the top right, the New York Times, shortly after published an investigation on the killing, and the Washington Post as well. So you can see how building on each other's evidence and reports, we can hold authorities accountable, and we can make sure the truth comes out, and we can make sure that the people responsible are made accountable for this. Just gonna quickly mention the last story that has kind of a similar component, because the New York Times and us published on the same day, but we didn't coordinate, I promise. And we had two very different sort of angles on the same story. So this is about AI. This is about the critique of the tools and the analysis of the tools that we have. We use AI. We partnered with a company called Rake and now Synthetic to. The idea was to detect the craters left by the big bombs in northern Gaza, sorry, by Israel. And as you can imagine, it was kind of a job of try to build an algorithm that could detect these craters that had to be bigger than a certain amount. They had to be bigger than 12 meters in order to be consistent with these big bombs. They're called 2,000-pound bombs. And the result was quite interesting because we detected more than 500 of these bombs being dropped in the first month of the war in northern Gaza. And it kind of became a framework to analyze the attacks. So, for example, we could detect the craters, the number of craters near schools in a certain area of Gaza, or in an area called Beach Camp, for example. And as I mentioned, the New York Times on the same day published this incredible visual investigation into Israel dropping 2,000-pound bombs in southern Gaza, where Israel ordered Gaza civilians to move for safety. So together, that kind of became this comprehensive record of these bombs being dropped and the consequences. And as I said, we also used it for other investigations. So we did these investigations on how Gaza's hospital were attacked and destroyed. We found out that 11 of the hospitals in Gaza had craters consistent with 2,000-pound bombs. In conclusion, then I'm going to leave some time for questions. In order to fight against disinformation and misinformation, debunking is not enough. Communicating the truth is not enough. What we need is like creating discourse and information resilience by these communities that I mentioned. There's not just Bellingcat, there's Center for Information Resilience, GeoConfirmed, all these online communities of OSINT analysts and researchers that often have transversal expertise. So there are architects, there are weapons experts, engineers, and everyone brings their expertise to the table. Audio forensic experts, it's a field that's quite new, but it's not just for the piece we did on Shireen, but there's an organization called Niarchos that's doing incredible work analyzing audio during attacks for accountability. And the other aspect is transparency. As I mentioned, transparency is one of the core values of OSINT and open source investigations, but it cannot override ethical concerns. It's important to understand that absolute transparency is a myth. Yes, we need to be transparent, build bridges with the audience via, showing our workings, methodological transparency. But the risk is the main principle always should have do not cause harm. So if there's a risk to put the people who we're in touch with, put them in danger, or if there's a risk of doxing individuals on social media, it's categorical that we take a step back. Critiquing the tools, I mentioned AI, but there are, part of the AI process, for example, is going through the images to check for false positives. There was one case, and it was not just me; it was like 3 or 4 people manually checking for false positives. There was a case of one crater was actually a roundabout, so yeah, we need to be careful. And last but not least, one aspect that is not, I think, is definitely not being dealt with enough, not by many news organizations, is the awareness of vicarious trauma. I probably should have put a disclaimer before this presentation because there was some graphic imagery, so I apologize for that. But people who work on open source investigations often have to repeatedly watch very graphic imagery. One of the pieces we did recently was on the Gaza paramedics who were killed and then buried, and I cannot tell you how graphic that story was and how traumatic it was. So it's very important that there's an increased awareness of that, and obviously safety issues they already mentioned. I'm just going to finish by showing you this tip sheet, which is probably more for training, but it's still good. I recommend everyone to go and watch Benjamin Strick's YouTube series on how to use all these tools, how to geolocate, how to analyze satellite imagery, chronolocate. It's absolutely excellent. He's a great trainer. He's at the Center for Information Resilience. And yeah, let me know if you guys have any questions. Check Bellingcat Discord if you want to be part of the community. It's a great place to hang out if you're a bit of a nerd like me. And yeah, any questions?
Do you have an extensive legal team to protect you from the attacks particularly from state actors who you may have exposed their duplicity?
Yeah, good question. Yeah, we have a legal team. We have a cybersecurity team. I have to say, some of these attacks, particularly with our female member staff, are being quite nasty. When we were covering Ethiopia a few years ago, we were covering the Tigray conflict in Ethiopia, and I thought it was interesting that I never became a target as a man, while the women in our staff were targeted by trolls, by state proxies, and I think there is an increased awareness of that, and we have a cybersecurity team that puts together a lot of measures, but in some cases, particularly for the most prominent reporters or correspondents, you might end up with someone stopping you in the street. It's happened to one of our correspondents when we were covering Ethiopia, and she was with her child going to school. So it's I think there's as much as you can do. Unfortunately, it's part of the job. You know that you're being exposed. When we were covering, for example, the Shireen story, one of the, I think, most surprising aspect was a lot of proxy actors were using the same tools that we were using, but then they were distorting their results or to match their own conclusions. Yeah, I think the only thing we can do is try to protect ourselves online as much as possible, using Signal, and despite what happened recently, but Signal is still the best platform for encrypted communication, ProtonMail, and yeah, those are some of the measures that we take.
How do you know when you're at a point that you're done? Because it seems like you could just keep going and checking and checking and checking. How do you know when you're where it's good enough to get it out there?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I should have said these tools are all great, but all of our reports have on-the-ground reporting where possible, obviously not in Gaza because international journalists are not allowed in Gaza. So we have our incredible Palestinian journalists and fixers there. But I believe in OSINT as sort of building layers of evidence. So there's the basic geolocation layer of evidence, then the satellite imagery to confirm what we're seeing. One of the stories I mentioned was the Syria story, which to me, I mean, it's not in my presentation, but you can check it online. To me, that's sort of the framework of all of our investigations is to have, we had witnesses talking to us who witnessed the massacre, who had family members who were killed, and they were talking to us, and they were giving us indications of where these mass graves were. So we checked on satellite imagery, and we could see before and after there was disturbed ground. Then there were social media videos showing showing diggers excavating these graves, and that sort of matched everything that the witnesses were saying. And then when we dug a bit into the profiles of the people who committed the massacre, were part of the Syrian army, we found the social media profile of one of these people, and we managed to geolocate the videos to do the same location. So it's a combination of several layers and factors, and I think one single element is not enough on its own, but when combined with witness testimonies, several witness testimonies, experts' opinion, like with Shireen, for example, we had not only audio forensic experts, but weapons experts who looked at the sort of pattern on the tree of the bullet holes. The audio forensics is increasingly very reliable because it can sort of scientifically prove what distance a certain weapon is to the target. And then, satellite imagery analysis, again, is very, kind of scientific. But yeah, each element on its own is not enough, and often we have to deal with the lack of evidence. One of the most prominent examples many people have heard and is the Al-Hali hospital, the Al-Hali hospital attack in Gaza, and that story sort of became a sort of sobering example of what can we do when there's no evidence. There was no weapon remnants, there was just a small crater, so we sometimes have to deal with the limits of open sources. Again, not having reporters on the ground, that's as much as we can do. So I think it's OSINT is open source investigations are helpful in sort of showing a fragment of truths, and as I said, part of the beauty of the job is that a lot of the community can come together and fill the missing gaps. Although obviously there's some healthy competition with other news organizations, I think the spirit is always one of collaboration, because the idea is like we all together trying to get to the truth and all people accountable.
No matter how thorough or compelling your investigation is, that there are going to be hordes of people in the comment section who will label it fake news if it doesn't align with their worldview. And I know you said debunking is not enough and there's other steps you can take to get the truth out, but I wonder if you ever feel like you're fighting an uphill battle, and if so, what sort of keeps you going?
Yeah, great question. Yeah, I think, there are some colleagues, particularly the BBC, who work almost exclusively in debunking these videos. Some of the examples I showed from the Iranian missile attack, part of the community, they're part of the community. One of them is Cheyenne, who's amazing. And I generally ask every day how they do it, because it's just like trying to stop the tide. Like, it's impossible. Like, there's so much disinformation. I think what keeps me going is that I strongly believe in the resilience of this community, and although there's been some setbacks, I mentioned the Al-Hali, for example, that kind of became a thorny issue within this OSINT community. But I really believe that this is the only way to sort of build resilience in the information environment, is like to get together with with people from other news organizations, doing more collaborations. We're trying to, at CNN, we're trying to do more of these collaborations, for example, with Lighthouse Reports. I mentioned CIR, the Center for Information Resilience, and other news organizations like The Guardian, for example. They recently published an investigation last week in collaboration with other news organizations in Europe about the killing of Ukrainian journalists in detention centers in Russia. So I think it's seeing not only the sort of impact that these stories have that really help you keep going, but also seeing how the resilience of the community keeps building on it. When I say impact, I mean sometimes it's a negative impact in the sense that we get, as you said, like a lot of like calling us fake news. And with one of the first investigations we did was on the Lekki toll gate in Nigeria in 2020. It was like a youth protest, and the local security forces opened fire on young students, killing a bunch of them. And we published one of the first OSINT investigations we did at CNN on that, like a timeline of events showing pretty, without any doubt that they opened fire. There were images of them with the rifle point. And in the aftermath, then the Nigerian authorities called a press conference and threatened to pull CNN off air, which it was like it's huge in Nigeria, so it would have been a disaster. But in the end, I'm kind of a bit naive, but I believe the truth comes out. So there was an independent panel that basically found out our reporting was correct, and they interviewed many people who were in hiding who told us the story. So yeah, I think sorry for the long answer, but yeah, that's what keeps me going.
Thank you so much for coming and joining us here at the University of Delaware. Great presentation, a lot of information, and I wonder if you could share, where do you start? So for the student journalists and for those who are at much smaller outlets with fewer resources, is there a place to begin, or is there a place that can do more than others, especially as you list so many resources here? Yeah,
I mean, I think that YouTube channel is key. Like, I'm self-taught. There wasn't anyone teaching this a few years ago. But Benjamin Strick is great. So if you want to learn about this, it kind of guides you through the tools from the very start, from scratch. And then I think, like, if you're curious, looking at Bellingcat, if you guys look up Bellingcat Instagram profile, they have challenges, which is fun. Someone like try to geolocate this place, and there's GeoGuessr. You probably have heard of GeoGuessr on X, or maybe it was a couple of years ago. But anyway, there's GeoGuessr. There are a lot of like tests. I think it's it can be also fun if you start from the beginning. To try to challenge yourself, find something, a video, wherever in the world. So yeah, I think if you start with these, like I think it kind of gives me like a dopamine hit when I do it, because it's just finding, looking at the video and finding the location is quite rewarding. But yeah, no worries.
Let's give a hand here to Gianluca. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks so much for that presentation. I think, as was just mentioned, that last comment, right? Some of this seems really complicated, but there are ways to learn how to do some of this. So this session is now over. We're going to take a break. So intermission. There we go. So we're going to start back up those conversations we were talking about earlier. Local news. We've got a couple great sessions connected to that. And then we have a conversation about documentaries. And then we'll be wrapping up with a couple discussions around the rise of things like podcasts, and then we'll in fact have podcasters. So we'll see you all in just a little while. Thank you.